Hello everyone, how you guys doing? Hopefully you're having a wonderful day. We are back again with another PWCC/Fanatics weekly review where I come at you every Monday with the top 100 soccer items auction off over there. As always, if you enjoy these videos, make sure to leave a like. Would appreciate it greatly. Helps me, helps the channel. But with that said, let's go ahead and get on over there. So here we go, starting at the bottom of page 4. Have to do it in 4 different segments, and this is starting at $126. I'd like to go a little bit faster through the earlier pages and then spend more time on the latter. I looked up a couple on this page. There wasn't anything that stuck out to me. Here's some odd and ends for modern. I thought the Super Calcio Ronaldo, it's always been a really nice one that stuck out to me. I really like the design, think the colors are good. Early Ronaldo, not rookie, but took a peek at it just to see what price it was doing, considering it's something that you see, but you don't see a ton. And the prior price was $174. Price before that, $144. As you can see last year, definitely some higher prices there in the 200s, 300s, but even in 2022, at times there would be low prices. So yeah, around the World Cup in 2022, nearly $200. This is at $140, which is a low price, but generally doing okay, I would say, for pre-modern. Got a Lamine Yamal PSA 10 Mega Cracks there for $138. Above that, nice Clint Dempsey, obviously biased. I thought this Neymar was pretty high for a camo out of $249. I know this is first year select, but camo out of $249 isn't all that coveted. It was really cheap, don't get me wrong, but a 2016 die cut green out of 5 went for around this price. Now it was damaged, I think it was a PSA 6, but all to say, I think that this was a good price for an out of $249. The Clint Dempsey I thought was fair. The top of the class from Flawless is a little lower numbered there, out of 10. Typically the base are out of 25. Above that, I want to check on this Jude because that didn't strike me as a crazy high price for a PSA 10 Jude rookie. That's an out of 99 green finest. Probably not the card nor parallel you think of when you think of Jude, so that might have something to do with it. Yeah, so this was $144. Last sale was a best offer, which is always going to do higher. That did $240. Before that, $180, $200, around about $200. And throughout last year, if you start to go back and sort of see how this was doing over a certain period of time, the highs last year were maybe close to $300, $250, so a decent bit lower, but nothing too crazy. Not a whole lot to glean from that. I think it's definitely down a good bit, maybe 40-50% from peak pricing during his Ballon d'Or potential early days at Real Madrid, but $144 seems fair. Above that, I thought this was a good price for a Neymar swatch from Modern. Now it is a PSA 10, but it's an out of 99 napkin swatch, so $150 doesn't seem bad. Got two different ends of the spectrum here. You have a Topps Now black label of Lamine Yamal, or a 18th year Messi out of 25 prized footballers orange. Surprisingly or not surprisingly, I don't know, the Lamine Yamal actually has more watchers. You don't see a black label BGS all too much, but on Topps Now they actually are pretty common from what I see. Above that, nothing too much in particular there. This NES is doing around the same price they typically do. It's been about $200 for a decent while. Some sales were higher, some lower. This is a little lower, but nothing too crazy. This Ansu Fati seemed like a decent price. $180 isn't anything crazy. It is out of 5, game used, badge, all that good stuff. Of course, at one point in time, if this was released earlier, this would have been a crazy number. Now, $180, and I think that could be, just a nice warning for those prospecting nowadays that if it doesn't go well, it's probably going to go really poorly. Because as much as there's a lot of people that say like, oh, I collect this guy, once things go south, that's when you really see who's collecting who, right? And here I actually think that this is an okay price, considering there's other legends in here for nearly the same price. Now, granted, those aren't playing days, but they are still players that have cards that people are actually going to want to buy in the future, while Ansu Fati, who knows, really? So that brings us to page 3. Starting here, we have a Heinerle 61 1.5 MK Pele. Goes for $186. Doesn't feel like a crazy price. Presents well in the front, at least from what you can see here. Second year R9 PSA 8 goes for $186. Then we have a BGS 9.5 Cristiano Ronaldo Aerial Assault. This goes for $186, a red version. That's a numbered card. For some reason, they don't have that in the title, but nonetheless, this was a relist, I do believe. Doesn't show here, at least the newer comp, but there was a comp here on October 6th, just a little over a month ago, for $324, which was a strikingly high price compared to some of the other ones. Not out of this world, considering a 10 last year did $630. But I guess, a BGS 9.5 to a 10 is sort of becoming a huge multiple. I did look at the grades on this, and this was actually a Gem Plus, which all of them had 9.5 and 110. So seemingly a copy that could cross well, but not a crazy price there, considering 32 watchers and could cross. 2010 Barca Lionel Messi PSA 10. We've seen these a good bit. That's at $192 now. We have a Rui Costa rookie PSA 8. Goes for $200. Unsure on the rookie designation there, but a lot of these Portuguese rookies do come in this sort of calendar version, so I wouldn't doubt it. But of course, with PWCC/Fanatics, I always have to be hesitant, so $198 doesn't strike me as a crazy price. Of course, Rui Costa, not a huge hobby star, but at the same time a hobby niche star for a certain particular group of collectors, which is always important. So 23 watchers there, the most in the row, obviously going to appeal to many. Bulgaria Sport Sindelar 6.5, this goes for 204. Looked that one up, and this was actually a pretty decent price. The last CSG 4 did 37. Now CSG 4 is close to like a 2 or a 3 probably, so it's not a 1-to-1 by any means. There was an 8 that apparently did 174 on eBay, so a 6.5 doing more than that is pretty decent. I don't know, whenever comps are this far out of line, you have to wonder if maybe they get relisted. Although I will say eBay stuff like this probably doesn't do as well as it would on PWCC/Fanatics, just because there's a lot more going on eBay, so I feel like this type of stuff is easier to sort of fall through the cracks, while on here, there's a decent amount of people looking every week that it isn't going to get by. This 95 R9 PSA 7 goes for 204. Feels a little low compared to some of the other comps we've seen, but not anything crazy. This Zara goes for 210, which feels like a lower price considering we've seen 1s and 2s of the same exact sticker. Could be a card, not too familiar with the release, but nonetheless, PSA 3 going for the same price of 1s and 2s have gone for isn't a generally good sign, but it is also a good value if you're someone that's wanting to buy it as a collector. I guess even a flipper potentially, but kind of hard to flip pre-war. Then in this row, I was impressed by the Continent, how many watchers that had at 30, 216 for this one. Can't remember exactly what year his rookie is, but that's definitely early. I want to say 85, but it could be later. Then we have a 70 Pele 1.5. This is not a rare back, or it's at least not the red and blue back, goes for 216, which at least to me seems like a pretty decent price for what is a really low grade Pele, when there are a lot, or not a lot, but relatively there's a decent amount of med to high grade available. Then above that, a mixed bag of the 1900s. We have a 54 Kubala that at least from the Toto searches I was doing in terms of pricing, there have been a couple that have sold for decent money over there, so 234 doesn't seem out of this world. Can't add a whole lot here. I'm pretty sure that this is a Serbian release, that you sort of get a lot of the 90s Eastern European stars in terms of rookies, at least to me, mimics the Modric rookies that we see nowadays. Maybe in terms of scarcity as well, hard to really know, at least from my point of view, since it's not something I'm into the weeds in, but in terms of how much we see it on the PWCC/Fanatics platform, you don't see it all too often. They typically do pretty good prices as well. A PSA 3 here, as you can see, doing 240. Then we have a 1950 Americana Balas Football of, it says Maca here. This is a 1950s America set, so I at least know a little bit about it. The set itself is not American, but they have the American players in there. We were only at a couple World Cups early on, and both of them are kind of notable in their own way. This World Cup, we beat England, and the Ting Halls, at least from what I've seen, are a little bit easier to find. These are a bit harder. Maybe I'm wrong on that. If so, correct me. But a lot of the names, both in Ting Halls and in this set, are mixed up. So this says Maca. I believe it was Ed Souza. I have a picture where I have it all laid out and trying to figure it out. It's like piecing together a puzzle, but nonetheless, 240 seems like a decent price. There was one of these that ran a couple weeks ago for a decent bit less. It didn't even make it into the top 100. This one does 240, a pop 1 of 1, 5 higher there. Then in this row, don't have a whole lot to add. Again, not too familiar with this 90s set. The Mbappe BGS 9 does 250, and you got a Bradley Barcola out of 10 doing 250 as well. Initially, I thought that this Donruss was just a base. I was kind of mesmerized, but it's actually an out of 25 press proof, so that sort of makes sense there. The Holland that we've seen that has dropped from 800 a year and a half ago to 250 now with that sapphire base, and then it reverts out of 99 at 250. Still doing numbers in terms of a prospect, but not one that I hear talked about too much, other than, a lot of the German collectors sort of milling about him. Above that in this row, the Andres Iniesta at 250. I do believe we looked that up. I could be wrong. We do actually have it here, and seemingly doing a decent number. There were a couple back here that were starting to fall into the 180 range, and now the last couple have been at 280 and 252, despite having a decent amount of sales as of late. I thought this Erling Haaland, the Grail, didn't seem all too expensive, at least compared to what I see some of the other Grails go for. And then moving into the top half of the auction, here we have a 2020 Jude Sapphire. SP out of 150 PSA 10 goes for 276. David Beckham sticker goes for 312. This 1960 Tupanamba Garrincha, one that I recently acquired in lower grade, went for 312. A 2.5 there. I sort of, as someone that just bought a lower grade and was potentially going to move up, I had looked at it, and to me, the back seemed pretty clearly removed, so I don't know if a 2.5 was necessarily worthy for something that OC, but nonetheless, 312 on that isn't anything too crazy. Thierry Henry sticker here goes for 312 as well. This Desailly PSA 9 does 312. Wanted to look that up because you don't see a lot of those in these auctions. Only 4 actually in terms of sales history. Probably just one that doesn't get bought and sold too much. Obviously, they're out there. At least I would imagine the years around that from the French releases do appear. But as you can see here, a PSA 3 last went for 51, so a PSA 9 now doing 312. I guess you also have a PSA 5 here at 162. Seems like a good deal if you're going for a PSA 9. As you can see, last one did 540 in 2022. I don't think that's a crazy drop. I mean, it's obviously a significant one, 40% or so, but I don't think it's out of this world for a pre-modern item that doesn't sell too often. Then we have a PSA 8 Gerd Muller 336 on that multi-language back. Take your pick here between a 2022 Leaf Pele 1 out of 5 or a Stoichkov 2022 Topps Dynasty at 372. The Dynasty does bother me in terms of the autographs. Having a blue signature over the Barca kit, just a really tough look for a lot of the, more collectible players in the set. So I think that is a shocking miss there, but nonetheless, both get a decent number, I would say. In this row, I thought the Endrick 1/1 rookie struck me as a low. We're in the world of Lamine Yamal's doing crazy numbers. Now, obviously, he's more proven. Definitely a much hotter prospect at this moment in time, but there was a period where Endrick was the talk of the town, and, a 1/1 Panini Instant presumably would have done a good number. Now, of course, it's Panini Instant. Is it really a rookie? There's a ton of questions that you can go ahead and ask, but at the end of the day, do people even ask those questions a lot with this type of stuff? Typically not, but in this case, seems like they did. Above that, Filfo, now to 125 PSA 10 doing 400. A Bergkamp Auto on card doing 408, along with a PSA 10 Champions of Europe Messi. We then have a PSA 9 Kylian Mbappe that goes for 400. Those have been pretty cheap, and Mbappe hasn't really been showing up. Madrid's in shambles. Definitely not what the hobby needs in terms of a lot of the younger prospectors. I mean, to be honest, it's just tough, and I think we saw that with the Ballon d'Or, with these guys sort of cannibalizing each other. You can only have so much stardom on one team, and when there's 3 or 4 guys vying for that, it's naturally going to be tough for them all to get their due. So I think we're seeing that sort of play out. Now, they might work through it. They probably will, but it's just a matter of time and who necessarily steps up for that. We have a higher grade Zara up here, a PSA 4 that goes for 420 in a panel version. Personally, always love panels. I think that they're just pretty classic in terms of soccer releases, but also naturally going to be rarer because you can always cut them. You cannot put them back together. Pop 1/1 and higher doesn't seem like a crazy price again in terms of what we've seen others go for. If there's PSA 1s that aren't in the panel doing 200 at times, I think a panel and a 4 doesn't seem crazy at 420. I will say though, Zara in terms of Toto history sales, I do think is selling really hot. Like back in the day, I don't think, at least from what I could find, that people were paying a lot for almost anything Zara. And, he does decent numbers here for the same type of stuff week in and week out, honestly. So I would say it's impressive. We then have a red, white, blue plaid Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi. I think that actually looks pretty good. I think that this type of stuff generally looks like it's sort of a knockoff, doesn't look great. But with the blue on the bottom, the red on the top, I actually think this looks really good. Now, I guess it gets this price because it's a PSA 8, so I get that. But, I mean, in terms of matchups, that doesn't seem like a terrible price. This one struck me in this row. The 2018 Cyrillic Text Neymar PSA 10. Must have just looked like a Neymar base card when I was scrolling through the weekly before, because I didn't even look at it. I had not had this under my radar. But man, 456 on that. I guess I didn't look at past comps. I'm going to do that now. Yeah, so in terms of past comps here, we have a 2022 sale for a raw at 305. We have another one in 2021 for a raw at, 650? And then a raw back in the day in 2019 for 51. So doing just some back of the napkin math, I mean, a PSA 10 at 500 doesn't seem bad at all, or actually 450. When you consider raws have done 300, 650, and even pre-boom they were doing 50, which you then imagine in a 10's probably doing like 100, 150. So when you consider 100 to 150 pre-boom to 450 now, and what is, at least in my opinion, a really cool parallel of Neymar from 2018 Prism, doesn't seem like a crazy price. Now, of course, at the same time, having a card that's a parallel, but also just basically looks like a base card, it's not the most appealing. I do get that. But the text on the front is so clearly distinct that I think it does add a lot. So I think 456 there does not seem crazy at all. I actually am, somewhat envious, so congrats on that. Above that, a Pirlo 10 of 10 from Topps Dynasty 2022. PSA 9 goes for 504. We have a 61 Heinerle Pele PSA 25. We saw the 1.5 MK earlier do almost 200. I think this is a much better bargain. Getting a 2.5 with a eye appeal sticker as well for 2.5 times the price is a pretty worthy upgrade. And in my opinion, one of the best looking Pele's, at least from design standpoint. The color match to the border, the light blue background, it just looks really, really good. The colors are vibrant on that one as well. Then we have a Ronaldinho PSA 3 that goes for 504. Don't see those sell a ton in lower grade. 504, not all that crazy, but still commanding a premium as those typically do. And then we make our way to the top page. So here we start with a Maradona Estampas PSA 1 with an eye appeal sticker, top 15%, does 540. That's around where those have been. Some worse copies will sell for less at times, some better copies even for more. Doesn't seem like a bad price though for a top 15% there. A lot of watchers as well. The treble, oh, I didn't even recognize that. Oh my, I thought the sale just generally seemed a little light. Now, to be fair, it's also a PSA 7, so that does sort of play a role here. When we look in terms of pricing, if we want to go all time, which, you know, hate me if you want, 2020, this did sell for $61. Post-boom, sort of, you know, during the boom, but beyond that, we have a couple base here, and then this is the lowest sale ever, so it did strike me as low, and that is actually correct. But when you look at other comps as of late, it's really not a bad sale. There's PSA 8s at $990, $990, a BGS 9 at $1,500, a PSA 8 that's a base at $400, so I guess, you know, that seems a bit high, but I guess I'm struck by it being a jersey number, not selling for that much of a premium. Now, granted, Mbappe, at least from what I can tell, has changed jersey numbers a lot early on, so it's not necessarily something that people think of. Like when you think of 29, you don't think of Mbappe, because a lot of people, that's not when they were watching him, and so I can understand it doesn't hold that much of a premium, but I do think that relatively that was a pretty good deal compared to most, considering jersey number and cheapest price that we've seen basically in a long, long time. Next to that, we then have a Monday Chromo PSA 8. This goes for $630, a little light compared to what we see at times. Those are typically closer to $750. We've even seen some of the team set mega cracks get a bit higher than this at times. So personally, I might chalk that up to a lot of newer people getting into Messi and buying stuff just because it's Messi, honestly, and not really wanting to put a premium on a league release that looks a little more cheap. If we're being honest, the Monday Chromo isn't a high quality product, doesn't have the best looks, but it's somewhat nostalgic, I guess, for the early 2000s. All that to say, I think that was light, but generally Messi stuff is done pretty good at this price range, so it's a bit confusing for me. Above that, a Messi 2021 auto. So this struck me at first because this is on card. This was the big release back in the day, and an on card doing 630, I thought that was, you know, just a shockingly low number. But when you do go look at the auto, I mean, you can make sense of it. It looks brutal. So I sort of get it. Also a team set release, you know, how big of an auto chases that for people, but not a great look there, I will say, at least compared to what those were coming out at. A Jude out of 5 Beam Team has gone for $6,300. I was sort of shocked that, I mean, only 17 watchers. To me, these always look like really cool cards and at least stuck out, but it's not anything I've ever gone after. Iniesta goes for $700 there. PSA 9 out of 10. To me, it's difficult with this Topps Dynasty release because as much as I want to be excited for it and hope that Modern gets some high-end product that people are excited about and want to have fun with, I think that's great, but at the same time, I don't want people getting overzealous or just over-eager with this type of stuff, because at the end of the day, yes, we can like this, but this is a post-playing career Iniesta on-card auto. And if people just fawn over this type of stuff, Topps will make more of it and more of it and more of it, and they'll print it until you can't handle it anymore. I mean, you see it with other sports and American sports where there are great players who have autograph cards that go for practically nothing, like shockingly low to me as someone that's just looking from the outside. And in soccer, we don't have that abundance of weight of past autos sort of sitting on our shoulders, so we don't know what that feels like, but I feel like we very well could in due time. So I do want to be excited for this type of stuff. I do want it to do decent pricing, but I also don't want it to do too great, because I think that people need to put into perspective what this is, which is a post-playing career auto. But at the same time, I understand a lot of people love the premium sets, on-card releases, match-worn patch, low number. I get it. And I think it's fair. I mean, you know, would I rather have this or the Jude Beam Team? Probably the Iniesta. Above that, 2018 Camo Harry Kane goes for $780 in a PSA 10. We then have a 2022 Lionel Messi Gold Terrace PSA 9 that goes for $810. I think we've seen that go before, but I could be wrong. Nonetheless, doesn't strike me as significantly high for a 2022 FIFA Messi PSA 10 release. I know it's not the release or the thing people are thinking of for 2022, but I like having the FIFA name in it. I like Select personally, so, you know, PSA 9, 810 there doesn't feel crazy. This Matthias went for $930 from 1979 Americana. This is labeled as a 3.5 with a blank back. Apparently, this is actually just a removed back, as it's a removed copy, and there is no back, and this should have gotten an authentic grade, but apparently CGC wanted to grade it as blank back for whatever reason. Unsure exactly what happened there, but goes for $930, which, I don't know, seems like a good price. I mean, you don't see a lot of these rookies in general even stuck, but pretty abysmal job there by CGC in terms of that slabbing. Above that, we have an Mbappe Father's Day Escher Squares out of 25 that goes for $930, a 2023 Lamine Yamal out of 5, Orange Topps Inception PSA 9 that goes for $930. We then have a Garincha 55 Vecchi in a PSA 2 that goes for $1,100. This is about the same price as a top 5% eye appeal did last week, so I thought this was a fairly good sale. Also really good looking, I would say, in terms of eye appeal. So I definitely agree with the sticker. We have a 96 Mejores Equipos de Europa Henry PSA 9, pop 1 of 7. These seemingly have been coming out more and more in higher grade, and this goes for $1,300. When we look here at past sales for PSA 9, the last sale did $2,800, and the one before that did, what was it, $1,500. So this does a pretty low price compared to the last comp, but compared to the comp before that, not terrible. I guess you'd get some real info here, because if you go lower, you don't see any of the Mejores Equipos de Europa, but if we look at a PSA 8, the last PSA 8 did $250. So to me, that's a super high premium on a PSA 9, especially in a world where we now have 7 9s graded, and it's just a matter of time until a 10 hits. And then what's the 10 gonna go for? I mean, it probably will go for a lot, as it probably should for the time being, but what happens if another 10, and then you just start to wonder, actually there is one graded higher. Okay, I thought there was none, there's one graded higher, so you just wait. At least one would assume. But nonetheless, $1,300 doesn't seem like it actually, compared to the 8, seems like a good price. If an 8's going for $250 and this is going for $1,300, a 5X for a 9 feels good. Next to it, we have a 64 Calciatore Pele of Velita back BVG7 that goes for $1,700. Looked at this one, high grade Pele, why not, from the 60s. And in terms of highest price ever, it is up there. It is what, 4th in terms of all-time high price. One of them was autographed, so really 3rd in terms of non-autos. The only ones to sell higher were probably the same exact one. Is that what this is? 54 million and 54 million. So same one here, sold twice, one time for 6,500 and another for 4,900, just within a month's time. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but let's just say that, you combine those, 5,500 there on a PSA 6 with an eye appeal sticker. BVG 7, probably a PSA 5. People typically do a couple grades down. I didn't look at this card in particular, so whatever you want it to be, I don't know. All that to say, PSA 5 has comped in the past in 2022 for $1,200, so if you assume this is a 5, that's actually a really good sale, but it is also pop 1 of 1 and higher, so you could just leave it in a BVG and be happy. I thought this was a really high price as well, a 58 Aquarella. This is a panel that has not been punched out. It graded authentic. Maybe there's some grading potential here, I'm not sure, but an authentic Aquarella Pele selling for nearly $2K is about as much as a PSA 2 or 3 might do. So I think that this was a good sale if you're the person, putting it to auction. But I don't know, maybe you can punch it out and get a higher grade. I don't know what the plan is there. It does look good, but the slab does not look good at all. The slab is just an absolute eyesore. Above that, we have an absolutely massive row here. The most watchers being on this red Messi and Ronaldo, as it probably should be. Modern's always going to win the day in regard to eyes. PSA 9 out of 149 goes for $2,400. Looked this up because of course you're going to do that. And in terms of the last one to sell, it was $2,370. So this one's a little bit lower, but nothing too crazy. Sales before that, $2,100, and then back in 2022, we start getting into the 4,000 and 8,000 range. You can't see it at the bottom, but that one down there, yeah, 8,000. Down a good bit, and, still down a good bit even from 2022, but seemingly doing pretty good in regards to price, given that 3 have sold this year, and they are holding fairly strong. And then the 2 next to it, some really big hitters in regard to vintage. We have this 1940 label is like 37 to 40, 38 to 40, but this is the Kicker Fritz Walter rookie. This is a PSA 4 that goes for $2,800. Pop 1 of 4, none higher. So highest grade, at least as of now, for the 1938 through 40 kicker. And yeah, we don't see this one sell a whole lot. It has sold a few times on Fanatics in the last couple years, but in regard to pricing, this is the second highest sale ever. A good bit down from this SGC 4 that sold for $5,100 back in 2022. This one goes for nearly half the price for this PSA 4. Now, you do always have to look with these backs. I do remember SGC, at least some of these, Maybe not these ones in particular, it could have been others, but with the Dur Kickers, they did grade a lot of them as unstuck, even though they were clearly stuck. And so for me, I don't really know what that's all about. But all that to say, some of these SGC grades could even be overgraded in getting these high of prices. So I think that this 4, compared to all the other ones that we're seeing, is a really, really good buy. As you can see here, a 1 in 2022 sold for $560, and then a 1 this year is sold for $750. So from 2022 to this year, I guess this is a 1.5, but basically the same price. Meanwhile, the PSA 4 is half the price of what an SGC 4 was. All in all, I think a pretty fair price. Now, of course, you always do have to wonder, higher grades coming out, but generally speaking, these aren't pouring out. Next to it, we have a 64 George Best Rookie PSA 7. This goes for $3,300, and this is going to be a pretty low price, especially a lot of eyeballs for vintage. 71 there on that George Best is huge. In terms of price, I looked at PSA 7s solely, and one did sell earlier, actually 2 this year, for $5,700 and $7,600. So this has come down massively. If we go back even further, this is a really weird stretch here. There's a sale for $22K, $6K, and then $30K. I know one of them has an eye appeal sticker, but that's sort of crazy. But I guess what puts this into perspective is just how crazy this did run. A PSA 7 pre-boom was selling for $607. In 2017 back here, $800, which, to be fair, $800 in 2017 for a soccer card is a lot. So I do think that this was very well respected back then, looking at this pricing, and definitely deserves, some movement up. Did it have too much too fast? Probably. Has it gone down too fast? You could also wonder that as well. $3,300 doesn't strike me as all too high. I'd struggle to see this go even lower. Now, generally, there are a decent amount of copies out there for the player that this is, but George Best does benefit by only having one rookie. All that to say, $3,300 there, a very low price, but also good from pre-boom. Again, we sort of talked about vintage where being 3 to 4x pre-boom is relatively the norm, so this being up 3 to 4x pre-boom isn't outside of what we're seeing. And then we move up another row. This isn't even the top row this week. We got some bigger hitters above that, but we start here with the PSA 9 Essay that goes for $4,500. We've seen these go a decent bit lately, but generally between 4K and 5K, and this is right between them. We then have a PSA 7 Eusebio Velita Blue Name. This goes for $4,800, which is a super, super high grade and super, super strong sale. If we look at dates sold and compared to some others here, there's going to be a PSA 6 here that sold for $1,500. So the 7 got a pretty good premium, a 3x over the 6 there. A 5 also recently did $750. Another 5 with an eye appeal did $1,500. There was a PSA 8 that did do $32,000 back in 2022, so that seems a little strong now, but still seemingly the highest graded to sell. And then beneath that, a PSA 5 back in 2022 and in 2021 did between $5,000 and $3,000. So one of the highest prices ever paid, but also one of the highest grades ever to sell. The Select Kaboom Messi PSA 10 from First Year Soccer Select, $5,200 there. In regard to past pricing, does just $10 more than the Toll Card World sale, which, make of that what you will. $4,800 before that, $4,400 before that, $3,800 before that, so seemingly doing pretty good. If we go back further, in 2022, this was a $3,300 to $3,200 card, which again, very surprising because a lot of Messi, especially some modern stuff, since 2022 hasn't done too hot, but the Kabooms have done pretty well, and the Kabooms haven't even dropped from sort of where they were during the boom. So Kabooms seem to be a way to sustain out the boom. There were some sales, I guess, back here for $6,300 at times, but to be nearly the same as the all-time high prices, pretty good. Now, of course, if you go down to the bottom again, if you go pre-boom with a lot of things, it's going to look, relatively minute, this being particularly more than the rest. $73, $94, $130 in terms of 2019 pricing, and then in a year and a half time, up to 5.2K, and it's held on relatively well, I will say. Kabooms were always something that personally, one, I don't really even like them, but two, I also was just scared, as I am with, different items out there. This one was always one that I was just like, man, I know all the flippers are going to leave it one day, and I know these people don't actually like it, but I think it's held enough of a narrative to where people still there's enough people all the time that are going after them. As you can see here, 114 watchers, so I think it just brings in tons of people, whether you like it or not, which has been pretty interesting to see. And in the top row, this one, just a huge week yet again. We have a couple Messis and an R9 in between them. We have a 2004 71 bits PSA 8 that goes for $7,500. We've been keeping an eye on that because there have been some interesting sales with it, at least as of late. Here it is here. So we have this graph that, had a pretty big surge there from June to, September, where it went from 5,500 up to 7,800. We then sort of asked the question, is this going to stay here? Because not many of them have sold in the last couple months. So Since then, there have been a decent amount to sell. We've actually had, what, 5, 6 tests the market since then, and all of them between nearly 7 and 8K. So to me, that actually looks really, really impressive in terms of being able to have that jump in price, but then sustain it despite the amount that are coming out. I'm actually really impressed. I don't know if this is a grander sign or anything, but in terms of the PSA 871 bis in particular, only a pop of 120, doing pretty good, I would say. And, you know, we always talk about pops in soccer as if pops in soccer are just way too high because we're just all scared. I mean, let's be honest. We all don't know how many of them are out there. We're all just nervous and don't want to be bombarded by more because we went through 2021, 2022 where that happened. But 120 for what is the most popular card in soccer is nothing. Now, of course, this is a PSA 8. There are other copies, other grades, all that. But, I mean, all that to say, I do think that this is relatively hard to find. And I can see and sort of be encouraged by it actually sustaining at this price despite many sales coming out. So that's a good sign there. There have been some cards in here getting slaughtered, but this one looking really good. This R9, speaking of, as we'll go to the other side now, the R9 El Mundo Deportivo has been getting slaughtered, and this one just as much. This PSA 9 goes for $8,400. We're not going to go look at it, but I think a 9 did 30K before or something like that. Like one of the highest sales ever for this card was up in the 20, 30K range. This one goes for $8,400. There was a time where, I mean, PSA 8s were doing this. Now it's a PSA 9. This is now a pop 104, none higher. So a lot of high grades have been coming out. I will say generally we haven't seen as many of these selling. There was a time where it seemed like new copies were coming out all the time. Now it seems like some are sort of, you know, being recycled rather than being brought to the market. So there is that going for it. $8,400, definitely not a price to scoff at either, despite the poor performance compared to years past. So despite the poor performance, could also be seen as a decent sale for what is a pre-modern item that's hand-cut with a rookie that has other rookies available for him. So decent number there at $8,400. And then finally, the top of the bunch, we have a 2022 Topps Dynasty Lionel Messi. 9 out of 10. The blue auto on the blue kit, you gotta love it. Streaky as well. Why not? There you go. Game worn on card. Obviously, it's got all the things you want going for it. Goes for $15,000, which seemingly is a pretty good price, I would say, compared to what the boxes are going for there at a couple thousand. Case was closer to what, 8 to 10,000. So not a bad hit. Definitely not one of the more, you know, desired Messis in terms of looks, but gets a good number nonetheless there at a PSA pop 1 of 1, PSA 10. Let's go ahead and look at next week. I've already given it a peek, so I do sort of know what's here. At least I thought I knew what was here. What am I looking at? Oh my gosh, this has changed a lot. Ellie De La Cruz. Okay, well that's why I'm so confused by that one. We then have a gold Mohamed Salah. That's really, really impressive. Lamine Yamal out of 5, select field level. We have a Pele Aquarella auto as well. Jan Moreno from 42. We have a Cruyff 74 Panini World Cup sticker. A couple Messis there from Modern. A nice Eusebio Velita back for 5 there. A Beckenbauer on-card auto. And definitely some good stuff scattered between. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. If you did, make sure to leave a like. I'd appreciate it greatly. Would love to know your thoughts down below. Anything you thought sold high or low. Maybe something you snagged. And if you want to see more videos like this as soon as I go live, make sure to subscribe. But with that said, hopefully you have a wonderful day. And peace.